I'm Rebecca Martinez, 28 years old, and I need to tell you about the night that shattered my world and then rebuilt it into something I never imagined possible. Growing up as the middle child in what everyone considered a perfect family in suburban Phoenix, I spent my entire life feeling like I was speaking a different language than everyone else. But what happened at our family gathering last spring, and the shocking discoveries that followed, proved that sometimes the most painful endings lead to the most beautiful beginnings. Before I dive into the story that changed everything, I want you to know that if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever wondered why your achievements never seem to matter, this story is for you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and if this resonates with you, hit that subscribe button because sharing these experiences helps us all feel less alone. Let me paint you a picture of the Martinez family dynamic. My father, Carlos, immigrated from Mexico with nothing and built a successful construction company through sheer determination and 16-hour workdays. He was the embodiment of the American dream, but his physical presence at home was as rare as rain in the Arizona desert. My mother, Linda, was a former nurse who gave up her career to raise us kids and manage my father's business affairs. She ruled our household with military precision, where everything had its place and everyone had their role. My older brother Miguel, now 31, was the crown prince. Star athlete in high school, full scholarship to Arizona State, now a successful civil engineer working alongside our father in the family business. Every conversation about Miguel began with "we're so proud" and ended with a list of his latest accomplishments. My younger sister Sofia, 25, was the princess. Gorgeous, charming, and blessed with the kind of natural charisma that made everyone gravitate toward her. She'd just graduated from nursing school and was already engaged to a doctor she'd met during clinicals. Her Instagram perfect life was a constant source of family pride and neighborhood envy. Then there was me, Rebecca, caught in the middle like a forgotten middle chapter in a book everyone skips. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't unsuccessful by normal standards. I had a bachelor's degree in graphic design from Northern Arizona University, worked as a freelance designer with a growing client base, and had just signed a contract with a small marketing agency that could lead to bigger things. But in the Martinez household, could lead to wasn't the same as has achieved. My passion for art and design was treated like an expensive hobby rather than a legitimate career. When I excitedly showed my parents the logo I designed for a local restaurant that increased their business by 40%, my mother's response was, "That's nice, Mija, but when are you going to get a real job with benefits?" When I landed my first major freelance contract worth $15,000, my father asked, "But what about job security?" Miguel has a pension plan. The pattern had been established early. When I was 10, I won second place in a statewide art competition. The ceremony was scheduled for the same day as Miguel's championship baseball game. Guess where my parents were? I accepted my ribbon and certificate alone, watching other kids hug their beaming parents while mine were 2 hours away cheering for Miguel's double play. That night at dinner, Miguel's game was dissected play by play while my award sat forgotten on the kitchen counter. When I finally brought it up, my mother glanced at it briefly and said, "Second place is good, Mija." But Miguel won first place in his division. The comparison stung, but it became so routine that I learned to expect it. College acceptances were another painful reminder of my place in the family hierarchy. Miguel's full scholarship to ASU had been celebrated with a backyard party for 50 people, complete with a mariachi band and a cake shaped like the ASU logo. When my acceptance letter to NU arrived with a partial scholarship, my mother frowned and said, "I thought you were applying to ASU too. Why settle for less?" The most crushing memory was my college graduation. It fell on the same weekend as Sofia's beauty pageant finals. Not only did my parents choose to attend her competition instead, but when I called to share that I'd graduated summa cum laude, my mother's response was distracted. "That's wonderful, Rebecca. Listen, Sofia just won Miss Phoenix. Can you believe it? We're so proud." I graduated alone, walked across that stage without a single family member in the audience, and drove the 3 hours home to find a house full of people celebrating Sofia's crown. My diploma was relegated to a quick congratulations before the conversation returned to Sofia's platform speech about healthcare access. Over the years, I developed coping mechanisms that probably weren't the healthiest. I stopped sharing my victories to avoid the inevitable comparisons. I created an independent life in Scottsdale, 45 minutes from my parents' house in Tempe, where I could build my identity separate from family expectations. My best friend Emma, who I'd known since college, became my emotional anchor and biggest cheerleader. Most importantly, I learned to build walls around my heart. It doesn't matter what they think, became my mantra, even though it mattered more than I cared to admit. I told myself I preferred being independent, that I didn't need their validation, but deep down, that hungry little girl who just wanted her parents to be proud of her never went away. By my late 20s, I had established what I thought was a good balance. I visited for major holidays and important family events, kept conversations surface level to avoid conflict, and focused on building my career and personal relationships outside the family sphere. It wasn't perfect, but it was manageable. My design business was finally taking off. I just landed a contract with a tech startup that could establish me as a serious player in the Phoenix design scene. I was dating Alex, a kind and supportive photographer who understood my artistic vision and encouraged my ambitions. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was building something that was truly mine. Little did I know that my carefully constructed piece was about to explode in the most devastating way possible. It was a warm Saturday evening in March when my mother called with that formal tone she used for family announcements. "Rebecca, we're having a family dinner tomorrow at 6. Everyone needs to be here. We have important news to share." My stomach immediately clenched. In Martinez family code, important news could mean anything from health scares to major life changes to interventions about someone's life choices. Given my recent success and growing independence, I worried they'd somehow heard about my new contract and were planning to criticize my career choices yet again. "What kind of news?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Just be here, Rebecca. And please dress appropriately. Not those artsy clothes you wore last time." For the record, my artsy clothes had been a perfectly respectable boho chic dress that cost more than most people spend on groceries in a week. But in my mother's world, anything that wasn't business casual was inappropriate. The next day, I spent an hour selecting an outfit that would meet my mother's approval standards. A conservative black dress, minimal jewelry, and my hair pulled back in a neat bun. I even covered my small wrist tattoo, a delicate design I'd created myself, knowing it would draw disapproving comments. The drive to my parents' house felt eternal. I rehearsed neutral conversation topics and prepared responses to the usual questions about my love life and career stability. At a stoplight, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror and barely recognized the anxious, tense woman staring back at me. Arriving at my childhood home, I noticed both Miguel's truck and Sofia's new BMW in the driveway. I was the last to arrive, which would undoubtedly be noted as another small failure. My mother opened the door before I could ring the bell, her eyes immediately scanning my appearance with the critical gaze I remembered from childhood. "You're 10 minutes late," she said, stepping aside to let me enter. "Sorry, traffic on the 101 was terrible," I replied, though I knew explanations never mattered to her. "Miguel and Sofia managed to arrive on time," she said with that particular tone that made everything sound like a personal failing. In the living room, my father was watching a soccer match while Miguel and Sofia sat together on the couch, Sofia showing Miguel something on her phone. They looked up as I entered, offering polite greetings before returning to their conversation. The dynamics were immediately familiar, them together as the favored children, me as the outsider. I kissed my father's cheek, and he patted my shoulder absently. "Mija," he said, not looking away from the television. "Now that Rebecca has finally decided to join us," my mother announced, "we can eat." Dinner began with the usual routine. Miguel discussed a major construction project his engineering firm had won, detailing the technical challenges and budget implications. Sofia shared updates about her new job at Phoenix Children's Hospital and her wedding planning with Dr. David, carefully emphasizing the prestige of her fiancé's position. My father nodded approvingly throughout their updates, asking engaged questions that showed he was genuinely interested in their lives. When the conversation inevitably turned to me, I shared news about landing the tech startup contract, explaining how it could establish me as a serious designer in the competitive Phoenix market. Before I could finish describing the creative aspects of the project, my mother interrupted. "That's nice, Mija, but when are you going to consider more stable work?" "Sofia, tell Rebecca about the administrative position at the hospital." And just like that, my achievement was dismissed and redirected to Sofia's success. I took a sip of wine and resigned myself to being a supporting character at my own family dinner. The tension I'd been carrying in my shoulders had just begun to ease when my father cleared his throat, calling for attention. "Your mother and I have some wonderful news to share," he announced, his face lighting up in a way I rarely saw directed at me. "Sofia and David have set their wedding date, and we've put a deposit down on the Phoenician resort for the reception." The table erupted in excitement. My mother immediately began discussing catering options while Miguel started calculating guest list logistics. I sat frozen, processing not just the news, but the realization that once again, I was learning about a major family event along with everyone else instead of being part of the planning. "When did you decide this?" I asked during a brief lull in the conversation. Sofia looked slightly uncomfortable. "About 2 weeks ago. We found out the Phoenician had a cancellation for October, and we had to move fast." 2 weeks. I repeated. "And I'm just hearing about it now." An awkward silence fell over the table before my mother replied, "We wanted to finalize the details before announcing it. You know how you can be about these things." The gaslighting was immediate and familiar. How I can be about what things exactly? But I knew better than to press the issue in front of everyone. "Congratulations," I managed, forcing a smile. "October will be beautiful. The Phoenician is gorgeous." As dinner progressed, I learned more about how excluded I'd been from this major family decision. They'd toured venues together, met with caterers, and even discussed the wedding party, all without mentioning it to me. Sofia would have her college roommate as maid of honor and 2 cousins as bridesmaids. Miguel would be walking her down the aisle since our father would be officiating a traditional blessing. Every detail had been planned around me, as if I were a distant relative who just needed to be informed rather than a sister who might want to be involved. When I finally found an opening to share my own news about the tech startup contract, which represented a major breakthrough in my career, my mother's response was dismissive. "Freelancing is so unpredictable, Rebecca. Miguel, tell your sister about the benefits package at your firm. Maybe they need a graphic designer." The suggestion that I should abandon my growing business to become an employee at Miguel's company was both insulting and typical. Once again, my achievements were minimized while being redirected to my siblings' success. Miguel, perhaps sensing my frustration, attempted what he probably thought was encouragement. "Design seems like a fun career, Rebecca. Not too much pressure, right? Must be nice having such a flexible schedule." The condescension in his tone, the implication that my work was somehow less demanding or important than his, made my jaw clench. I excused myself to the bathroom, hands shaking with suppressed emotion. Once safely behind a locked door, I called Emma. "They're impossible," I whispered, explaining the situation. "Sofia's wedding has been planned for weeks, and they're treating me like I'm some acquaintance who just needs an invitation." "That's seriously messed up, Rebecca," Emma replied, her indignation on my behalf strangely comforting. "What are you going to do?" "What can I do? Make a scene? That would just confirm their opinion that I'm the emotional, unstable one." "Rebecca," Emma's voice turned serious, "at some point, you have to stand up for yourself. This isn't just thoughtless. It's emotional neglect. They're treating you like you don't matter." Her words hit home. Years of therapy had helped me recognize the dysfunction in my family dynamics, but I still struggled with confrontation, especially with my mother. "You're right," I finally said. "I can't keep pretending this is normal. Do you want me to come get you? I can be there in 30 minutes. I considered the offer. "No, I need to handle this myself. But stay by your phone. Always. And remember, you deserve basic respect." "That's not asking too much." I splashed cold water on my face, reapplied my lipstick, and returned to the dining room with a new resolve. For once, I wouldn't swallow my feelings to keep the peace. For once, I would demand to be treated like an equal member of this family. When I returned to the table, the conversation had moved on to wedding flowers and decorations. My mother was suggesting elegant white roses and gold accents, while Sofia preferred something more colorful and modern. I think sunflowers could be beautiful for an October wedding, I offered, trying to contribute constructively. They're in season and would look stunning with a desert backdrop. My mother's expression immediately soured. Sunflowers are far too casual for a wedding at the Phoenician, Rebecca. This isn't a barn dance. Actually, sunflowers can be quite elegant when arranged properly, I persisted, drawing on my design background. And they photograph beautifully in natural light. I don't think you understand the level of sophistication we're aiming for, my mother replied dismissively. This will be one of the social events of the season. The Castillos have connections throughout Phoenix's business community. The implication was clear. My aesthetic judgment wasn't refined enough for such an important occasion. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. That must be David, Sofia said, brightening immediately. He's joining us for dessert. Miguel jumped up to answer the door, returning with Sofia's fiancé. David was everything my parents could want in a son-in-law, handsome, successful, from a prominent Phoenix family, and genuinely kind. He greeted everyone warmly, giving me a sincere hug. Rebecca, it's great to see you. Sofia tells me your design business is really taking off. Thank you, I said, surprised and grateful that he'd even remembered. Congratulations on the engagement. October will be perfect. A flicker of confusion crossed his face. Oh, I thought you knew. We actually decided on October about 3 weeks ago. I assumed Sofia had already told you. 3 weeks. Even Sofia's fiancé had assumed I'd been included in the planning process. As coffee and my mother's famous flan were served, the conversation continued to revolve around wedding details. I made several attempts to participate, each one subtly but firmly redirected. It was like being in a play where everyone had a script except me. Then came the moment that shattered my remaining composure. David, responding to a question about the wedding party, said, "My brother will be my best man, and Sofia's got her college friends standing up with her. We're keeping it small, just siblings and closest friends." He turned to me with a warm smile. "We haven't officially asked yet, but we'd love to have you as a bridesmaid, Rebecca. You've always been so welcoming to me." Before I could respond, Miguel interjected with a laugh. "Well, you'll have to make sure any dresses accommodate Rebecca's unique style preferences." The casual dismissal of my aesthetic sensibilities, combined with the revelation that my inclusion in the wedding party was still being debated, triggered something deep inside me. "What exactly do you mean by my unique style preferences?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Miguel looked uncomfortable, realizing his comment had come across as harsher than intended. "You know, just that you're more artistic than the rest of us." "Artistic," I repeated. "You mean the same artistic ability that just landed me a 6-figure contract with a tech startup?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. My mother quickly tried to redirect the conversation. "Let's not turn this into a discussion about work, Rebecca. This is Sofia's special evening." "Everything is Sofia's special evening," I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. "Just like everything is Miguel's achievement or David's success. When exactly is it my turn to have a special evening?" "Don't be dramatic," my mother said sharply. "This is about the wedding." "No, this is about how I'm consistently treated like an afterthought in this family," I replied, years of suppressed frustration finally finding voice. Sofia's engagement has been planned for weeks, and I'm learning about it at the same time as extended family. Miguel gets celebrated for every project, but my biggest career breakthrough gets dismissed as unstable freelancing. My father finally entered the conversation. "Rebecca, we're proud of your work, but you have to understand our concerns about financial security." "Whose financial security?" I challenged. "I'm supporting myself just fine. I'm building a business, creating jobs for other freelancers, and actually succeeding in a competitive field. But none of that matters because it doesn't fit your definition of success. We just want what's best for you, my mother said, her tone becoming defensive. What you think is best, I corrected. Not what actually makes me happy or fulfilled. Sofia, who had been silent through this exchange, finally spoke. Rebecca, I'm sorry you feel excluded. I didn't realize. Didn't realize what? I interrupted, my voice rising slightly. That your sister might want to be included in your wedding planning? That she might have feelings about being treated like a distant relative instead of family? My mother's face was flushing with anger. This is exactly why we handle things the way we do. You always make everything about yourself and create drama. Drama? I echoed incredulously. Wanting to be treated with basic respect is drama? Being hurt by exclusion is creating a scene? You're being overly sensitive, my father said, his tone placating but patronizing. We've always treated you the same as your siblings. The lie was so blatant that I almost laughed. Really? When was the last time you asked about my work with genuine interest instead of concern? When was the last time you celebrated an achievement of mine without immediately comparing it to Miguel or Sofia?
Miguel shifted uncomfortably.
Come on, Rebecca, it's not that bad. Isn't it? I turned to him. Can you name one time in the past 5 years when my accomplishments were the focus of a family dinner? One time when my news wasn't immediately redirected to your success or Sofia's achievements? The silence that followed was damning. I win art competitions, and you ask why I'm not focusing on practical subjects. I graduate summa cum laude, and you ask why I didn't choose a more prestigious school. I land major contracts, and you worry about job security. Nothing I do is ever enough because I'm not Miguel or Sofia. My mother's composure finally cracked. How dare you accuse us of favoritism? We've given you every opportunity, every advantage dash. You've given me the same opportunities, I interrupted. But you've never given me the same support, the same celebration, the same pride in my choices. Because your choices have been questionable, she snapped, abandoning all pretense of diplomacy. We expected more from you, Rebecca. We raised you to aim higher than being a freelance artist living in some trendy apartment. There it was. The truth I'd always known but never heard spoken so directly. Expected more, I repeated, my voice steady despite my racing heart. You mean you expected me to be someone else entirely? Someone who fit your image of success rather than finding my own path? We expected you to live up to your potential, my father said, though he sounded less certain than my mother. My potential as defined by you, I clarified. Not my actual interests, talents, or dreams. My potential to become the daughter you wanted instead of accepting the daughter you have. David looked extremely uncomfortable, and I felt bad for him being caught in this family explosion. Sofia was staring at her engagement ring, avoiding eye contact with everyone. This is ridiculous, my mother declared, standing abruptly. I don't have to sit here and be attacked in my own home. I'm not attacking you, I said, also rising to my feet. I'm finally telling you how it feels to be the child who never measures up, who never gets celebrated, who never gets included in family decisions because her opinions and feelings don't matter. My mother's face transformed with rage. You ungrateful child. After everything we've sacrificed for you, every opportunity we've provided, every advantage we've given you. Gratitude isn't the same as accepting mistreatment, I replied. I am grateful for the opportunities, but I don't owe you my identity in return. Your identity, she scoffed. Your identity is what? A struggling artist who can't commit to a real career. The words hit like physical blows, each one precisely aimed at my deepest insecurities. I'm not struggling, I said quietly.
I'm succeeding.
The problem is that my success doesn't look like what you want it to look like. Success? My mother laughed bitterly. Miguel owns a house. Sofia is marrying a doctor. You rent an apartment and make logos for restaurants. The casual dismissal of everything I'd worked for, everything I'd built, broke something inside me. I create things that matter to people, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I help businesses tell their stories. I solve problems through design. I'm building something that's mine, not following a path someone else chose for me. Philosophical nonsense. My mother dismissed. This is exactly why you'll never be truly successful, Rebecca. You live in fantasies instead of facing reality. The room fell silent. Everyone seemed to recognize that she'd gone too far, but no one said anything to stop her. I'm successful enough to support myself, pursue my passions, and build meaningful relationships, I said, surprised by how calm I sounded. I'm sorry, that's not impressive enough for you. It's not about impressive, my mother insisted, though we all knew that was exactly what it was about. It's about stability, about making something of yourself. Making something of myself, I repeated. You mean making myself into someone you can brag about to your friends at church? Someone whose achievements reflect well on your parenting. We just want you to be happy, my father said weakly. No, you want me to be happy in ways that make you comfortable, I corrected. There's a difference. My mother had reached her limit. Enough, she shouted, her voice echoing through the dining room. I don't have to listen to this ungrateful nonsense. You're selfish, Rebecca. You've always been selfish. While your siblings worked hard and made us proud, you've done nothing but disappoint us with your choices. The words hung in the air like poison. Even my mother seemed shocked by her own vehemence, but she didn't take them back. Get out, she continued, her voice cold and final. Get out of my house. If we're such terrible parents, if you're so mistreated and unappreciated, then go. Get out and never come back. The silence that followed was deafening. David looked horrified. Sofia had tears in her eyes. Miguel stared at his plate, avoiding everyone's gaze.
My father started to protest.
Linda, she doesn't need to leave Dash. Yes, she does. My mother cut him off. I'm done. I'm done with the drama, the accusations, the constant victim mentality. If Rebecca thinks she's so independent and successful, she can prove it by being independent from us. I looked around the table at my family. My father, who had never once in my memory stood up to my mother's treatment of me. Miguel and Sofia, who had benefited from the very favoritism they now pretended didn't exist. David, who was probably rethinking his decision to marry into this dysfunction. In that moment, I saw our family dynamic with crystal clarity. This wasn't love. This wasn't even normal dysfunction. This was a toxic system where love was conditional on conformity, and I had been assigned the role of scapegoat so long ago that everyone had forgotten it was a choice. With strange calm, I picked up my purse and jacket. You're right, I said, my voice steady. I am independent and successful, and I don't need to beg for scraps of approval from people who fundamentally don't respect who I am. I looked directly at my mother. I hope someday you realize what you've just thrown away. With those words, I walked toward the front door. Behind me, I heard Sofia sob and Miguel say something to my father in Spanish, but I didn't turn back. As I reached for the door handle, my mother called out one final cruelty. Don't expect us to come running when your little art career fails and you need real help. I paused, my hand on the door, and turned back one last time. I wouldn't dream of it, I said quietly. I've learned not to expect anything from you, except disappointment. And with that, I walked out into the warm Phoenix evening, leaving behind the family that had never really felt like home. The drive back to my apartment passed in a blur of tears and disbelief. Had I really just been disowned by my own mother? Had she actually told me never to come back? The words replayed in my mind, each repetition making them seem more surreal. Only when I was safely inside my apartment with the door locked did I allow myself to completely break down. I collapsed on my couch and called Emma through tears. I need you, I managed between sobs. She told me to get out and never come back. I'm on my way, Emma replied without hesitation. 20 minutes. Emma arrived with wine, chocolate, and the fierce loyalty that had made her my chosen sister. She listened as I recounted every painful detail of the evening, her anger on my behalf both comforting and validating. They're toxic, she concluded when I'd finished. All of them. Your mother is the ringleader, but your dad and siblings are complicit by letting it happen. They're still my family, I whispered, the reality of what I'd lost beginning to sink in. Family is supposed to love and support you, Emma said firmly. Biology doesn't give anyone the right to treat you like garbage. That night, I cried myself to sleep, but for the first time in years, the tears felt different. Not just like sadness, but like the necessary pain of finally removing a splinter that had been embedded too long. The first few weeks after the confrontation were the hardest of my life. I swung between feeling empowered and liberated to being devastated and questioning everything. Had I overreacted? Should I apologize? Was I really as selfish and dramatic as my mother claimed? Emma was my lifeline during those dark days, reminding me of my worth when I couldn't see it myself. She helped me recognize that what I was experiencing was grief, not just for the family I'd lost, but for the family I'd never actually had. Work became my sanctuary. I threw myself into the tech startup project with an intensity that surprised everyone, including myself. The creative challenges provided an outlet for all my emotional turmoil, and the client was thrilled with the innovative solutions I developed. Alex, my photographer boyfriend, became another crucial source of support. He'd watched my family dynamics from the outside and had often gently suggested that their treatment of me wasn't normal. Now he was there to hold me when I cried and remind me of my strength when I felt weak. "You did the bravest thing possible," he told me one evening as we watched the sunset from my apartment balcony. "You chose yourself over a system that was slowly killing your spirit." 3 weeks after the confrontation, I received a text from my father. "Your mother is very hurt. Maybe you should call and apologize." The message infuriated me. Once again, I was being asked to fix a situation I hadn't created, to apologize for setting boundaries and demanding respect. I showed it to my therapist, Dr. Sarah Chen, whom I'd started seeing to process the family trauma. "How does that message make you feel?" she asked. "Angry," I replied immediately. "And guilty, which makes me angrier." "What would you like to say to your father?" I thought for a moment. That I'm not the one who needs to apologize. That I was treated terribly for years, and standing up for myself doesn't require an apology. "Have you considered saying exactly that?" I had been avoiding any communication with my family, but Dr. Chen helped me see that healthy boundaries didn't mean complete silence if I chose to respond. I crafted a careful reply. "I'm not going to apologize for asking to be treated with respect. When Mom is ready to have an honest conversation about how I've been treated in this family, I'm willing to listen. Until then, I need space." My father didn't respond. A month later, Sofia called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. "Rebecca?" Her voice was hesitant, unlike her usual confidence. "Can we talk?" "I'm listening," I said cautiously. "I've been thinking about that night, about what you said. And I need to apologize." I was silent, too surprised to respond immediately. "You were right," she continued. "We have treated you differently. I never really saw it before because it benefited me, but watching you walk out that night, it opened my eyes." "What do you want, Sofia?" I asked, not ready to be vulnerable yet. "I want my sister back," she said, her voice breaking. "I want to understand how we got here and figure out how to fix it." We agreed to meet for coffee the following week. That conversation lasted 4 hours and changed everything between us. Sofia revealed things about our family that I'd never known. How the pressure to be perfect had given her an eating disorder in college. How she sometimes felt like a performing monkey, always having to be on to maintain her favored status. How she'd been in therapy for 2 years, working through the anxiety that came from conditional love. "But you were the golden child," I said, confused. "Golden cage is still a cage," she replied. I was so busy being perfect that I never learned who I actually was underneath all the performance. She told me that our fight had triggered a crisis in her relationship with David. He'd been horrified by the family dynamics he witnessed and had insisted they postpone the wedding until Sofia dealt with her family issues. He said he wouldn't marry into a family that treated people the way we treated you, she admitted. And he was right to be concerned. Over the following weeks, Sofia and I began building a real relationship for the first time in our lives. Not the superficial sibling connection we'd had before, but genuine friendship based on honesty and mutual support. She revealed that Miguel had been struggling too. The pressure to take over the family business had been crushing him for years. He actually wanted to be a teacher, but felt trapped by expectations and financial obligations. "We're all prisoners of this system," Sofia said during one of our coffee meetings. "You're the only one who had the courage to break free." 2 months after our confrontation, I received an unexpected visitor at my apartment. Miguel stood at my door, looking exhausted and vulnerable in a way I'd never seen before. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. I let him in, and what followed was the most honest conversation we'd ever had. He apologized for his role in my treatment, admitting that he'd been complicit because it was easier than risking his own favored status. "I've been a coward," he said, tears in his eyes. "I watched Mom tear you down year after year, and I said nothing because I was afraid she'd turn on me next." He told me that he'd been miserable for years, trapped in a career path he never chose and a role as the perfect son that felt suffocating. Our confrontation had forced him to examine his own life and realize how much of it was performance rather than authentic choice. "How did you find the courage to walk away?" he asked. "I realized I'd rather be rejected for who I am than accepted for who I'm not," I replied. Miguel had started therapy and was considering making major changes in his life. He wanted to go back to school to become a teacher, despite knowing it would devastate our parents. "They'll say I'm throwing away everything Dad built," he said. "Maybe," I agreed. "But you'll be building something that's actually yours." As my relationships with my siblings evolved and healed, the issue of my parents remained complicated. My father made occasional attempts at contact, brief texts, phone calls I didn't answer, messages through Miguel and Sofia expressing his desire to reconcile. My mother, however, remained silent and, according to my siblings, furious. She'd told extended family that I'd had a breakdown and needed space from the family. She refused to discuss what had happened or consider that her own behavior might need examination. 6 months after the confrontation, my father showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door to find him standing there with flowers and a face full of regret. "Mija," he said softly, "can we please talk?" I let him in, though I wasn't sure I was ready for whatever he had to say. What followed was a conversation that changed our relationship forever. For the first time in my life, my father spoke openly about the family dynamics, about his own role in enabling my mother's behavior, about his regrets and fears. "I failed you," he said simply. "I let your mother's need for control override my responsibility to protect all my children equally." He told me about his own childhood with an authoritarian father, how he'd sworn to be different but had instead become passive in the face of my mother's strong